Well, everyone, it is 10:08 p.m. on December 10th, and I am not in my regular studio, as I'm sure you can tell. I am actually in my hotel room. I just took the family on a little vacation to Universal Studios. Shout out Universal Studios. And we've been having a great time, but I found out like a couple days before we left for this trip that the final update to Kill the Justice League was dropping while I was on this trip. So you know how I be. I packed an Xbox Series S in my suitcase and brought it so that I could make this video and kind of see this whole saga through to its conclusion, because this final season of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League Season 4 with Deathstroke marks the end of the game. They've already announced they are not doing anything after this. No more content. This fulfills actually the next episode, which launches in January. That fulfills their full 1 year planned content schedule. And after that, they will be sunsetting the game and moving on. No more updates, nothing. But it's not all bad. They're adding offline mode finally. They're going to do all of that. So it's not like the game just pulls a concord and disappears. It will be playable even after they pull support, which is a good thing. But the whole Kill the Justice League saga is about to come to an end, and it's a little surreal to see. But here we are actually in the game, and as you can see, I've got Deathstroke, Mrs. Freeze, the Joker, or as I like to call this version, the Jonkler, and Lawless, who is a character apparently. I've been experimenting a little bit with how he controls ever since the kids went down for bed a couple hours ago, and honestly, like, it's not bad. Basically, his movement is based on this kind of warp ability he has, and then this grapple hook that can also latch on to the free air. It's really straightforward. It's not too crazy or anything, but it gets the job done, I guess. It's just not particularly exciting. Also, sorry, I started one of these missions before I started filming, and I forgot that they just have these random missions with like tanks and stuff that just happen in the game, and they don't really make any sense. And apparently this is because some of the game directors, they at one point wanted to have every character with their own vehicle, and they wanted players to be able to build their own vehicles and drive them around the city and various maps and stuff. But eventually they cut all of that, and it didn't make any sense anymore in the context of the game, because it was just nonsensical. I mean, you're playing as the Suicide Squad. Why do we have little cars that we're driving around? Like, just no part of it makes any sense at all. But regardless, that was a cool transition. I'll give him that little Batman thing. Okay, I'll give him that. But with that having been said, like, there's so many pieces of this game that just don't make any sense at all. Like, if we just take a moment to just appreciate this, this is a game that was supposed to be a big, like, exciting looter shooter, but in its original concept, it was much more like in line with the Arkham Knight era of Rocksteady games. It was going to be much more narrative. It was going to be much grittier, much darker. They had this idea for an open world thing. They had this idea for sort of bases that you would sort of customize by having different shop sellers in there. They wanted you to experiment with tons of different characters and weaponry and loadouts for each of them. But the story of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League seems to be one of managerial lack of focus or lack of commitment. There's plenty of reporting that's been done where the people that made this game were very competent. I mean, the developers themselves were very competent. It was the creators and directors and stuff who could not make up their minds. They would have them build out this system for like tank vehicles that you fly around and shoot stuff with for some reason. And then they would be like, it doesn't really work. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's cut it. But we did all that work, so let's still put it in the game, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's still put it in the game because we spent so much time on it, but let's just, move on. And with this, it actually reminds me of like the whole Bat Tank situation in Arkham Knight, where that whole Bat Tank, I think a lot of people assume that was an instance where they built out this whole thing with the Batmobile, and it was really cool and really well done. But they were like, we spent so much time and money building this, we've got to use it a lot more. And so they built a third of the game around missions for the Batmobile, and it just totally kills all the pace. It doesn't feel like a Batman game. They had to do weird narrative stuff to explain it, like the Arkham Knight just saying, I could have put people in each of those tanks to stop you, Batman, because you wouldn't kill anybody, but that would be too easy. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that this is a historic problem for the team over at Rocksteady, specifically Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker, who have now made their own new studio. They happened to leave Rocksteady right before this game released and flopped. Convenient, isn't it? But I really think that is the tale of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It's a game that didn't know what it wanted to be, but everything they tried to make it were things that nobody wanted. I mean, nobody wanted a looter shooter 4-player co-op game from a studio that has made some of the most incredible single-player games of all time. Like, nobody wanted them to waste their time and talents on this type of project. Nobody wanted weird rewards that are paid out with what I guarantee you was at some point, like in time, a loot box. This big crate behind this screen where you can see these things being paid out. This 1000% was at one time a loot box that you could buy, and then they reworked it into its own thing. Like, it's really, really stupid, but that's, I really think, how they originally intended for this to work, that this was going to be a loot crate. You pay $5 for it, flies in, and maybe they cut that out after the initial gameplay reveal that went viral for being so terrible, but I'm honestly not sure. Either way, having the final playable character, Deathstroke, here is nice. I will say he is not actively annoying in the same way that a lot of the other characters have been so far, where it's like they were just trying to speed run how fast you could turn off the game because of how obnoxious the characters were. Like, the Joker, really obnoxious. Mrs. Freeze, I don't even understand why we have a Mrs. Freeze when we have a Mr. Freeze. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then Lawless, I don't think anybody, including Lawless, knew that that was a character until they announced that she was the character for this season, for season 3 specifically. But Deathstroke is a character people actually wanted, and they made us wait until the last minute. And it reminds me of a post I saw in a comment in response to one of my Luke Stevens live stream clips, which you should definitely go subscribe to that channel if you haven't already. But in response to one of our live stream clips over there, somebody commented, is like, yeah, you know the old saying, save the best for the very end when nobody cares anymore. And I really think that that's accurate. Like, everybody wanted Deathstroke. Everybody agreed Deathstroke sounded like a cool playable character, but Rocksteady, instead of giving it to players, decided to hold it until they had put out these other characters that nobody wanted. It just doesn't make any sense at all. But it's why I've said plenty of times on stream that this feels like a game that was built in an attempt to give players what the devs thought they should like, not what they would like. You know, it's like, you might like to just play a Batman game, or you might like to just play a superhero game, or even a Suicide Squad game that has a broadcast of characters, and maybe it is a little more irreverent, a little more like raunchy and gross, and just, I don't even know what you would call it, but just Suicide Squad. You know, it's a different vibe, it's a different tone. That's totally fine, but that's not what we got in this game. In this game, we got this weird, like, preachy, bizarro, uninteresting hodgepodge of mediocrity. And then when we did get the chance for them to address it and fix it with, like, new playable characters, we get playable characters nobody's ever heard of, and the ones we have heard of are bizarre reinventions of the wheel. You know, it's just not anything they needed to do. It's like, we had the Joker, why are we trying to make the Joker that's insecure and anxious and stuff? I remember that in one of the, like, preview interview things that they did, where they said, this Joker, you know, not everything's easy for him. You know, he's a little insecure, maybe he has some insecurities and vulnerabilities that he hasn't worked out yet. Turns out they didn't do anything with that. They didn't explore that topic at all, but that is what they were trying to do, apparently, with his character for some reason. I don't know why, but that's what they were trying to do. But beyond just, like, the writing and the theming and the choice of which characters to get, it also didn't make a lot of sense because all of the characters kind of play the same. I'll have Jacob put up some different footage here of each of the playable characters, but Like Shark, he works by basically leaping around and jumping around. He's a little bit more unique. Harley, she swings around, but all of the DLC characters move with basically the exact same control scheme and the exact same movement set. It's just skinned in a slightly different way. They can all basically glide with one basic ability, which is held down by left bumper. Lawless does a weird anti-gravity float thing, which is really bizarre. Joker's able to jump and leap, and then Mrs. Freeze goes and glides on ice that immediately disappears. But fundamentally, they all control the exact same. It's not like one character is able to zip up to high elevations faster than the others to snipe. They all can get up there the same speed. They can all sprint up walls the same way, as you can see here, where I just grapple onto this and then I just run up the side of it. Like, everybody can do that. They all control the same. They all feel pretty much the same. The only real reason you would choose a different character is if you happen to really like their specific like ultimate abilities or specific flair to their movement, I guess is what you'd call it. But other than that, there really is no reason to pick one character over the other beyond just generalized fandom. And one of the things that's driven me the most crazy is their ultimate abilities that I just alluded to. They all play the same. Like, all of the abilities are damn near identical, because again, like with Lawless, all of her abilities are themed around like anti-gravity, gravity stuff. You would think if you had a character that can like control gravity, what would be a cool ultimate ability? Throw down something, it creates like a black hole, everybody's sucked into it, and then you and your team of co-op players can all jump in, start throwing grenades that get sucked into the black hole and shooting into them, and all the bullets get pulled into it, just unloading into this black hole of enemies that attract all that damage, and you deal massive amounts while also restraining them. That's what would make sense. But instead with Lawless, what we got was basically just one grenade. She throws down a grenade when you press left bumper and right bumper, and that's it. And it's just an explosion, looks just like any other grenade, and it's no different. And with Deathstroke, I was excited to maybe see some really unique something, but instead his ultimate ability, as you can see here, by default, without any tweaking or anything, if I pop this, he throws out knives, it looks like, in all directions, but in effect, it is also a grenade. Like, it's just centered on him. I'm pretty sure, like, the gameplay tool or whatever they're using to achieve this effect is just an in-game grenade with a different coat of paint and an animation that plays right before the grenade goes off. Like, again, there's just nothing really unique here. Everybody uses grenades, everybody uses the same movement, everybody uses effectively, or at least damn near close to, the same guns. All of them play the same, and that's just not that interesting, especially when we're talking about like supervillains that do have unique abilities, that do have unique capabilities and powers and things, and for them all to play exactly the same is just a bummer. But then again, maybe that is part of the theme here, where maybe their goal was to have everything really samey, because the rest of the gameplay is also really samey. You'll do these exact identical missions with the toy truck over and over and over again. You'll shoot the purple zits on the giant like artillery cannons or whatever over and over and over again. You'll swing through the same corridors over and over. You'll fight the same hordes of bosses and mini bosses over and over again. There's just nothing unique here. I mean, it's just really baffling that it got as far as it did and that they ever bothered releasing it, because it really never, I think, had a chance of any success. It just never was going to be there. It's just not good enough, frankly. And it's too bad, because the team that made it at one time was very capable. Rocksteady was at one time one of my favorite developers, and the idea of Rocksteady making a bad game was crazy. It's like if you said that, Rockstar is going to miss with GTA. It's like, I mean, maybe, but I'd be very surprised. And now it's a symbol of failure, as I somewhat appropriately get downed while I'm trying to search for words. It's only Where's my team? Where's my robot team? Is my team down? No, there. Thank you, Lawless. Thank you. But listen, I mean, none of this is a surprise to any of you if you've been following these videos as they've been working on it. You know all of this. The game is mediocre, and even when it was on deep sale recently, where it went 95% off, meaning the $100 crazy deluxe edition of the game was available for $5. Even then, they got a small spike of players, but it pretty much immediately vanished because the game is effectively 10 hours long for the campaign, and it has, in that 10-hour period, maybe 2.5 hours of content, like maybe, and that's about it. There's just not enough here to really justify spending a lot of money on it. Even, sorry, my phone went off. Even free to play, this still is a bit of a stretch because free to play games are built on keeping you engaged for weeks, months, years at a time. And when you compare this to something that is a really solid live service offering, whether that's like, you know, like the kings of it, like Fortnite, or if it's something on a smaller scale, like Marvel Rivals, which just recently popped off, you know, in those instances, those games have way more staying power than this game, frankly, ever had a chance of. Not because I don't think the team was capable, but because the direction was so uninspired, and it was so clear that this was just an attempt to chase live service trends for the sake of easy cash. And ironically enough, in that pursuit of finding easy cash and easy financial success, they kind of demonstrated how it's not actually easy money. It's not actually that easy to pull off a live service game. It's actually kind of tricky, and they really showed that you can't just phone it in. But I think it says a lot about what they thought of gamers and they thought of their customers, that they thought you could just phone it in and their customers would go along with it. They really thought that they could just do the bare minimum, pump out your generic looter shooter, and people would spend lots of money on it and buy cosmetics and play it because it has DC on the box and because, oh, it's superheroes. I like superheroes. I'll give them all my money. And players just are not that diluted. Players are smart and gamers are smart. And if you're trying to sell them a crock of crap, they're going to pick up on that, notice, and not buy it. And then they're going to tell everybody else not to buy it. And then you'll be drowning in perhaps the most dangerous thing for a live service game, which is being uncool. And that is precisely what Suicide Squad became. It became uncool. It became toxic. And I think this is perhaps like the bigger point of Suicide Squad for me. Like, this game did not fail as catastrophically as it did because it was like just that bad of a game. People will point out like it had solid gunplay, it had solid movement. Sure, like the cutscenes were well done. Okay, not the writing, but sure. But the reason why people like you, I imagine, are watching this video all these months after this catastrophic failure of a live service game kicked off, the reason why it's become so fascinating for people is because of what it represents. Like, it's not that people actually care that much about a failed live service game, but people do care about what it represented in the industry. People cared that this was the perfect embodiment of when corporate greed overpowers creativity and creative freedom within a studio that was otherwise very, very talented. And it's something that gamers have been extremely frustrated by over the last 3, 4, 5 years. We've even seen other massive studios that were very prolific in the PS4 era, like Naughty Dog, for example, that had years of their time seemingly wasted working on a Last of Us Online game that was canceled, that never saw the light of day. That's crazy that they would spend that much time, by all accounts, like 3 to 4 years of active development on a live service game only to scrap it. And we see other things like Concord, which of course represent hundreds of millions of dollars that could have been spent elsewhere working on games that anybody could have told you would be a failure, but that are pushed out because executives like Herman Holst and Jim Ryan really want to appease shareholders with a live service hit. And I think that's why the failure of Suicide Squad for so many people feels so good, because it shows that you can't just take gamers for granted. You can't just sell out your very creatively talented and equipped studio. You can't just sell them out at the altar of live service games. You can't. It just doesn't work that way. And even if it sounds good in a boardroom to be like, hey, this team made 2 Game of the Years in their last 3 releases. So if we have them make a live service game, they'll make a live service game that is Game of the Year and will make tons of money. That makes sense if you think like an executive that doesn't play video games. It does not make sense if you understand video games. And I think that the failure of Suicide Squad demonstrates very, very clearly that a lot of the executives and the people making these decisions on what to greenlight and what not to, they don't understand gamers like you or me. They don't seemingly care to understand what we actually want. And if anything, they have active contempt for what we do want, which is why we saw them push out the characters that we saw them push out, why we saw them approach the story in the way that they did, and the marketing in the way that they did. In my opinion, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a game that deserved to fail. It deserved to die. And here we are at its funeral. And it feels strange. I don't know what this feeling is. Maybe it's a sense of peace, where we all knew how this story was going to end, and now it's ending this way, and we can kind of be at peace with it. Maybe it's pride that the community all banded together not to reward them for this steaming pile of garbage. I'm not sure. But let me know what you're feeling in the comment section below. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. And I will say, I know people that work on these types of games that are at large studios and publishers. They watch these videos too, so make sure to let your voice be heard in the comments of what you thought of Suicide Squad. What, if anything, could have saved it? Let me know what you think down below. But with that, I think this is our final video on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It's over in January. They'll be shutting it down and moving on. It now has its offline mode. It now has pretty much all the content it's going to need. And here we are. It's over. So I'll leave it there. I can finally delete this off my Xbox, and we can all move on. I was going to do a segment where we talked about the intro cinematic and the ending cutscenes, but it's not really relevant. It doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't really say anything of interest, and it's not like the story matters now because it's all going away. So I think this is just where we leave it. With that, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more gaming stuff. Check out my other channels that are popping up on the screen now. And until next time, my friends, much love. I will see you very soon. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.